Kalala Yahweh, Ba Shema Mashek Yabasha, Shema Yasharala Yahweh Alahaya Nawaka, the Ba Mashpaka, Shalom, Shalom. May peace, serenity, and prosperity be multiplied unto you all. This is the book of First Maccabees, chapter 4, starting from the top. Then took Gorgias 5,000 footmen and 1,000 of the best horsemen, and removed out of the camp by night, to the end he might rush in upon the camp of the Jews and smite them suddenly. And the men of the fortress were his guides. Now when Judas, therefore, he himself removed, Now when Judas heard, therefore, he himself removed, and the valiant men with him, that he might smite the king's army, which was at Emmaus, while as yet the forces were dispersed from the camp. In the mean season came Gorgias by night into the camp of Judas. And when he found no man there, he sought them in the mountains. For said he, these fellows flee from us. But as soon as it was day, Judas showed himself in the plain with 3,000 men, who nevertheless had neither armor nor swords to their minds. And they saw the camp of the heathen, that it was strong and well harnessed, and compassed round about with horsemen. And these were expert of war. Then said Judas to the men that were with him, Fear ye not their multitude, neither be ye afraid of their assault. Remember how our fathers were delivered in the Red Sea, when Pharaoh pursued them with an army. Now therefore let us cry unto heaven, if peradventure Yahweh will have mercy upon us. And remember the covenant of our fathers, and destroy this host before our face this day. That so all the heathen may know that there is one who delivereth and saveth Israel. Then the strangers lift up their eyes and saw them coming over against them. Wherefore they went out of the camp to battle. But they that were with Judas sounded their trumpets. So they joined battle, and the heathen, being discomfited, fled into the plain. Howbeit all the hindmost of them were slain with the sword. For they pursued them unto Gazra, and unto the plains of Idumea, and Azotus, and Jamnia, so that there were slain of them upon 3,000 men. This done, Judas returned again with his hosts from pursuing them, and said to the people, Be not greedy of the spoil, inasmuch as there is a battle before us. And Gorgias and his host are here by us in the mountain. But stand ye now against our enemies, and overcome them, and after this ye may boldly take the spoils. As Judas was yet speaking these words, there appeared a part of them looking out from the mountain, who when they perceived that the Jews had put their host to flight, and were burning the tents for the smoke that was seen, declared what was done. When therefore they perceived these things, they were so afraid, and seeing also the host of Judas in the plain ready to fight, they fled every one into the land of strangers. Then Judas returned to spoil the tents, where they got much gold and silver, and blue silk, and purple of the sea, and great riches. After this they went home, and sung a song of thanksgiving, and praised Yahweh in heaven, because it is good, because his mercy endureth forever. Thus Israel had a great deliverance that day. Now all the strangers that had escaped came and told Lysias what had happened, who, when he heard thereof, was confounded and discouraged, because neither such things as he would were done unto Israel, nor such things as the king commanded him were come to pass. The next year, therefore, following Lysias, gathered together 70,000 choice men of foot and 5,000 horsemen, that he might subdue them. So they came into Idumea and pitched their tents at Bethsura, and Judas met them with 10,000 men. And when he saw that mighty army, he prayed and said, Blessed art thou, O Savior of Israel, who didst quell the violence of the mighty man by the hand of thy servant David, and gavest the host of strangers into the hands of Jonathan the son of Saul, and his armor bearer. Shut up this army in the hand of thy people Israel, and let them be confounded in their power and horsemen. Make them to be of no courage, and cause the boldness of their strength to fall away, and let them quake at their destruction. Cast them down with the sword of them that love thee, and let all those that know thy name praise thee with thanksgiving. So they joined battle, and there were slain of the host of Lysias about 5,000 men. Even before them were they slain. Now when Lysias saw his army put to flight, and the manliness of Judas' soldiers, and how they were ready either to live or die valiantly, he went into Antiochia and gathered together a company of strangers. And having made his army greater than it was, he proposed to come again into Judea. Then said Judas and his brethren, Behold, our enemies are discomfited. Let us go up to cleanse and dedicate the sanctuary. Upon this, all the hosts assembled themselves together and went up into Mount Sion. And when they saw the sanctuary desolate, and the altar profaned, and the gates burned up, and shrubs growing in the courts as in a forest, or in one of the mountains, and the priest's chamber pulled down, they rent their clothes and made great lamentation, and cast ashes upon their heads, and fell down flat to the ground upon their faces, and blew an alarm with the trumpets, and cried unto heaven. Then Judas appointed certain men to fight against those that were in the fortress, until he had cleansed the sanctuary. So he chose priests of blameless conversation, such as had pleasure in the law, who cleanse the sanctuary and bear out the defiled stones into an unclean place. And when as they consulted what to do with the altar of burnt offerings, which was profaned, they thought it best to pull it down, lest it should be a reproach unto them, because the heathen had defiled it. Wherefore they pulled it down, and laid up the stones in the mountains of the temple in a convenient place, until there should come a prophet to show what should be done with them. Then they took whole stones according to the law, and built a new altar according to the former, and made up the sanctuary and the things that were within the temple, and hallowed the courts. They made also new holy vessels, and into the temple they brought the candlestick, and the altar of burnt offerings, and of incense, and the table. And upon the altar they burned incense, and the lamps that were upon the candlestick they lighted, that they might give light in the temple. Furthermore, they set the loaves upon the table, and spread out the veils, and finished all the works which they had begun to make. Now on the 25th day of the 9th month, which is called the month of Caslu, in the 148th year, they rose up betimes in the morning and offered sacrifice according to the law upon the new altar of burnt offerings, which they had made. Look at what time and what day the heathen had profaned it. Even in that was it dedicated with songs and citherns and harps and cymbals. Then all the people fell upon their faces, worshiping and praising the God of heaven, who had given them good success. And so they kept the dedication of the altar 8 days and offered burnt offerings with gladness and sacrificed the sacrifice of deliverance and praise. They decked also the forefront of the temple with crowns of gold and with shields, and the gates and the chambers they renewed and hanged doors upon them. Thus was there very great gladness among the people, for that the reproach of the heathen was put away. Moreover, Judas and his brethren, with the whole congregation of Israel, ordained that the days of the dedication of the altar should be kept in their season from year to year by the space of 8 days, from the 25th day of the month of Caslu, with mirth and gladness. At that time also they builded up the Mount Sion with high walls and strong towers round about, lest the Gentiles should come and tread it down as they had done before. And they set there a garrison to keep it, and fortified Besur to preserve it, that the people might have a defense against Idumea. Review time. So, in essence, 1 Maccabees chapter 4 tells us the meaning of the Feast of Dedication. And we'll get to that in a second, but let's review some previous verses here within this chapter. So in verse 6, this was the beginning of that certain uprise to the rededication of the temple, where Judas Maccabees and his soldiers showed themselves to the Greeks with no weapons or armor. And when the Greeks saw this, they were afraid. But furthermore, Judas Maccabeus and the soldiers with him had the presence of the Most High when they presented themselves as such. Because we see here in verse 8 through verse 10, Judas Maccabeus recalls what Yahweh did for the ancestors when Pharaoh and the Egyptians were pursuing them. And he reminds them to cry out unto the Most High and to remember that covenant that was made with the ancestors here in verse 10. In verse 11, he said we should do this so that the heathen may know that the Most High is the one who delivereth and saveth Yasharah. Going further down, verse 24. Once they defeated the Greeks, they sung a song of thanksgiving and praise. And with that thanksgiving and praise, it was known that the Most High mercy endures forever. And that's something we need to remind ourselves on with our own challenges, right? with our own obstacles that we're faced with. The Most High's mercy endureth forever. We should always be rejoiced and glad in that mercy. Now, when Judas saw Lysias and his men, he made a prayer to the Most High. Starting at verse 30, which what we read, he prayed to the Most High. And this shows that power of prayer that Judas Maccabees and the soldiers that were with him of the Jews exercised. That was nothing but faith, remaining strong and courageous, and leaning on the Most High to be delivered out the hand of the enemy. And after that prayer and they engaged them, they got put to flight because the presence of the Most High empowered Judas Maccabeus and his soldiers. So much so that the heathen saw their manliness and their valiant attitude, whether they lived or died. And that put them to flight. They ran off after that, as verse 35 showed us. Judas and everybody that was with him recognized this. And when they recognized this, they went back to the temple that was defiled by the Gentiles to rededicate it. So they went back to Mount Zion, back to that temple, and cleansed it. From verse 36 all the way down to verse 51. They took the appropriate measures to fix the temple and cleanse it from the profanity of the Gentiles. And on the 25th day of the 9th month, started the Feast of Dedication. That cleansing that I briefly spoke about in summary of these verses is what the Feast of Dedication revolves around. The rededication of the temple after defeating Lysias' army, which were the Greeks. That's what the Feast of Dedication is about. So on the 25th day of the 9th month, for 8 days straight, you should be rejoiceful and glad. You should make it your due diligence to be rejoiceful and glad throughout the Feast of Dedication. Play a lot of music. Play a bunch of praise music, truth music, worship music, and just make it your business to be joyous, glad, and full of thankfulness and gratefulness. Make it a priority to be in such mirth, worshiping the Most High, giving praise and thanks. Verse 56 says, They kept the dedication of the altar 8 days and offered burnt sacrifices with gladness and sacrificed the sacrifice of deliverance and praise. So that's the sacrifice we are to give the Most High for those 8 days. 8 days of deliverance and praise, gladness. We're commanded to be worshiping the Most High with gladness and thanksgiving and joyfulness. As Deuteronomy 28 stated, that's one of the reasons why we became cursed as a nation of people, because we didn't worship the Father with joyfulness and gladness and thanksgiving. So though the Feast of Dedication isn't a direct feast day from our Torah, the Most High still honors it, because it was a time that he gave deliverance to Israel from the Gentiles. It was a time of deliverance. So for those 8 days straight, they showed their thankfulness. They showed their gratitude to the Most High. They played music and were joyful and glad, all in worship and praise to the Most High. They even did some decorations. As verse 57 says, so starting next week at sundown of the 24th day begins the actual feast. So instead of doing all that Christmas junk, you should just be praising the Most High and being glad for the deliverance he's given you in your own life. You should be joyful and glad for all the things he has done for you just this year alone. You should just be reflecting on everything the Most High has done for you for those 8 days. And be joyful and glad and just thanking the Most High throughout the day of those 8 days. Just continuously thanking the Most High. Of course, you can play music. You can do other things with your family, with your congregation. But the core meaning of this feast is to be joyful and glad to the Most High in remembrance of his mercy and love he's shown you. And during that time, after they rededicated the temple, they also built high walls and towers round about to protect themselves from another running down from the Gentiles, as verse 60 says. This was First Maccabees, chapter 4, the entire chapter. May peace, serenity, and prosperity be multiplied unto you all. Shalom.